and then I make them available for people that are not here. Okay, Faith, you want to go ahead and open in prayer?
Right. And I will just add to what Dana said, not only welcome, but any question is a valid question. If you have a question, there are no stupid questions. And there is nobody here who's got all of the answers. Dana and I are learning along with the rest of you. And if we don't know something, we'll check it out for you as best we can. But nobody has, this is the way it is. And we brook no argument. So feel free to say, I'm not sure about that, or what does that really mean? And somebody else is probably thinking the same thing. So across the times, across the distance, no matter where we are, let's come together in prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks for all the blessings that you give to us every day. Some that come in strange and struggling circumstances. Some that come from persons whom we never would have expected to be a blessing for us. Some that come when we're asking for them. Some that come seemingly out of the blue and surprise us with their grace and their goodness and the joy that they bring. Lord, help us to receive such blessings gratefully. Help us to recognize them, naming them to ourselves and to others as well. And Lord, as we see ourselves and know ourselves to be blessed, help us to use those blessings to be a blessing to others. As we spend this time together, deepen your word within us. And may that word show forth in how we speak and in how we live. And this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, excellent. I did think that just for folks who haven't done, this is an Amy Jill Levine study. We've done another study by her, but we really enjoy her. She is a New Testament scholar at Vanderbilt University, which is awesome because she's Jewish by tradition. I'm not completely sure she's completely practicing Judaism, but she's Jewish. And so it's always awesome when we have a Jewish scholar teaching us New Testament. It's so fabulous. So we're a fan. Carol?
The author spends quite a bit of time talking about the different translations and the meanings of some of the words. And I was curious when Jesus was teaching, we're told that he basically spoke Aramaic. But what about the scriptures that he referenced? What would the scriptures have been for the prophets? Would it have been in Hebrew, or was it in Greek, or was it in their local language, the Aramaic? I'm just kind of, that was a curious thing to me.
Most of the people who heard Jesus, they would have used the translation known as the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. And it was done by Jews. 70, that's where the name came from, Septuagint. Okay, so the translations which the New Testament quotes are basically from the Septuagint.
But wouldn't they, I thought some of them would have also had Hebrew
Yes,
of it as well.
Particularly some of the rabbis.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It was either in Hebrew or Greek. Those were the two options. Okay. So let's see. All right. So we have two questions, and we do from Michelle, and also Robin has a question. And then the question that we had presented to you is, was there anything that struck you in the reading or in the video? What questions and or affirmations did you extract from the reading or the video? So while I give you a moment to ponder that,
Well, that's Robin's question.
That's Robin. And Michelle asked before that, can you explain blessed more? Robin's question is, I was struck with her skepticism about the Q source for Matthew and Luke. I thought that was generally accepted. Yeah, I mean, I think she's—
Me too.
Yeah, but you know, scholarship is ever evolving. And so I'm not surprised that things like this come up. Is there real dispute about these days? You know what I will do is I can ask at Duke to find out.
Well, and the other thing is, in some ways, she says, I believe that he copied from Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, which those of us who accept the Q source also believe that they copied from Mark. Mark being the first.
Right.
Okay. Generally, we think Matthew and Luke took information from that, took information from each other, from a common source they were both using, which is what we call Q, and then had their own sources.
And just
as well.
Just to remind people that, go ahead, Robin.
Sorry, what she actually says though, it's not that he borrowed from Mark, which yes, that's part of the standard Q thing. She says, it strikes me as just as likely, if not more likely, that Luke had access to Matthew's gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than Q.
Rather than Q, yeah. Yeah.
And most of us would say in addition to.
Okay.
I mean,
but I think it's a fascinating question.
That's called the four source hypothesis.
Right.
Now, she may be questioning it. And as Dana says, put a group of biblical scholars in a room, ask them one question, put three in a room, and you'll get four answers.
Yeah. So I was going to say, Ruth, are you taking New Testament at CST? Are you taking New Testament at CST? No?
I'm in a class called Jesus the Teacher.
Oh.
So it's focused, it's Dr. Greg Raleigh, and it's focused on Jesus is teaching specifically. And last week we talked about the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
It would be interesting to hear what current scholars are, you know, I would actually ask this question. I might ask my Old Testament professor, because I know that she is familiar with Amy Jill Levine. And so it'd be interesting. And just so I think just as a reminder is, Faith, you already mentioned it, that Q is a source that most scholars believe was used in writing the Gospels, not John, but in Matthew, the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
And the reason they call it Q
German.
Is from the German word Quelle, Quelle, which begins with Q.
Which means source, doesn't it?
Not to be confused with the guy in Star Trek.
Right. And doesn't it mean source?
Yes.
Yeah, it means source. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Dana, did you want me to ask my professor a question?
It would be interesting to say, hey, listen, we're reading this book by Amy Jill Levine. My guess is the professor knows who she is.
Sure.
And say, hey, she made reference to this. Is there any current research or academic scholarship on it?
Okay.
Paul, go ahead.
So what I'm struck by, I think, is that Amy Jill, as a teacher, is taking Jesus as a teacher. And I think her seeing Jesus as a Jew talking to Jew allows her as a Jew to accept Jesus. Maybe not to accept all of the doctrine that we hold with, but I just think it's really cool, as you've already said, for somebody from another tradition to be taking in so much You know, that's wonderful. And you have another question, which is, which of the Beatitudes do you relate to most? For me, it's blessed are the pure in heart, because it is so hard. It is so hard to be pure in heart.
Faith, do you want to talk at all about Michelle's question?
Yeah, I was just going to get back to that. As she points out in the book, and we did a study some years ago on a sermon series at Escondido on the Beatitudes and took each one of them. It's very hard to translate that word in such a way that there is an exact English equivalent. And so some scholars will come down on the side of happy, which can sometimes really distract us from, because to be blessed and to be happy in some of our minds are not quite the same thing. Some of them have called them beatitudes, as though these are the attitudes that you are supposed to have, something you strive for. And yet, I think Levine and also Jesus himself are saying is, you don't strive for these things. These are gifts. These are blessings. You are already there. If you're mourning, you're already blessed. If you're poor in spirit, you're already blessed. It's not something you've got to work at to get done. Someone has suggested they are descriptive, not prescriptive. In other words, they're saying what is, not what you're striving for. But none of the words, blessed is about as close as we can probably come in our language to what is meant by that. But it is really saying God has gifted you. You mourn, God has gifted you. You are the poor in spirit. God is gifting you with that, or through that.
And she does talk.
Michelle, if that helps a little.
Yeah, I was going to ask Michelle. She does talk more about that on page 5. Michelle, was there something specific other than that, or is that kind of where you were going?
I read through it, but then I put it to the, to the each beatitude, and it just came out funny,
Which?
Like happy?
Blessed?
It's awkward. As you point out, it's an awkward thing to sit there and try to read it and make sense of them.
Tell me, like, you mean because you don't like?
Well, like, blessed who they who mourn. I mean, I'm glad she gives the explanation that she does, because if you translate it, as she points out, happy, it sounds ridiculous.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think she does talk about that happy, it doesn't like, are you really happy when you're mourning? Right. But
yeah, well, that's why I'm saying, she does point out some of it, but I still felt kind of, okay, but what does it mean?
Well, maybe if you see it as, if you are this thing, God is gifting you in this moment. God's grace is there, even through that circumstance.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
Because basically, in that time, see, go back to what she said at the beginning, which was, this is a Jew talking to Jews. Okay. So if you're mourning, it probably means you lost something. Maybe you're sick. Maybe somebody died. That's a punishment from God. Okay. If you're poor, that's a punishment from God. So what Jesus is doing here, what?
I don't agree with that. That's not.
No.
What
That was the prevailing view. Prosperity equals God's blessing.
Job.
I was going to say, but that's the whole joke. That's the whole joke.
That's exactly. She and I had a debate on Job this week. But do you see what I'm saying? Jesus is turning the prevailing notion on its head. God is not punishing you. God is blessing you. Okay? God is not taking something from you. God is giving something to you. It's countercultural for that time.
I wanted to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
I like that I think one of the statements she said was that a heart that knows how to grieve is a heart that knows how to love. And I think for me, the correlation to love deeply is to also grieve because you love deeply, because it's important and it means something to you. And that's something that I didn't really become aware of till I became a mother, because I think having lost both my parents as a child, I made this wall of wanting to feel that grief to the depth that I did. And it was having children that allowed me to open up to love again and to be open to that. And so it definitely resonated with me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Donna, I know you have your hand up too. Where you went to? Oh, there you are. Wait, I can't. Okay, okay.
Which Donna?
Donna, you're on two different screens, and so I think you got to unmute something. You're everywhere. We love seeing you though. It makes my heart happy. Nope, we still can't hear you. You're on two devices. Right where you're looking right now is the device that has set. Nope. Go back to where you were looking. You're on two devices. Nope. You're not looking at the device that has the sound. You're looking at the wrong device. Yeah, that's what Ruth, yeah.
By the way, there's a good sermon to read by Barbara Brown Taylor, for those of you who know Barbara Brown Taylor. It's called Blessed Are the Upside Down.
You got it, Donna.
And she does talk about this very thing, how he turns it all on his head.
Donna, go ahead. I think we can hear you now.
Am I okay now?
Yeah, that's the device that we can hear you on.
Okay, thanks. I prefer reading this book to watching the video. And one of the reasons is because reading it allows me to put it in my own words, to have it have a greater impact on me. I like to see the different interpretations, and then I want to add mine to it too, so that I can feel it. Like the word meek to me always meant humble. And that's how I like to look at it. So I don't know if that's fair, but if scholarship is constantly evolving, and I'm putting myself in that lineup, I guess.
That's right.
Well, I think one of the things that you can do with this, and it has been done, is you can do your own Beatitudes. You can craft additions to this or alter them. And I think there's a couple of suggestions at the end of her leadership guide. I'll share at the end of today. Okay.
Somebody did that. Somebody did that, and I've got those.
Chelsea had
Nada Boltz-Weber.
Yeah, Nadia
And that was
Boltz-Weber.
the one that Chelsea shared.
Yeah, Nadia Boltz-Weber.
The bookmarks, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. So what about a beatitude that you struggle with, or that you weren't sure you understood? Was there any specific one that was that you were like, Jonathan, go ahead.
This is following along really with what Donna was saying, but I've always felt the first one, blessed are the poor in spirit, really was blessed are the humble, because that made more sense to me. And I think putting that number one is really important. And So I have felt that if you want to learn how to get along with God, be humble. And blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, something like that. If you want to enter in, begin with being humble. And that's what I didn't like poor in spirit, but I loved humble. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I will say poor in spirit for me has now moved to ego free, which is, I'm a big ego person. Not that I mean, I'm sure we all have one, but for me, ego free is it's the ego is a preoccupation with the self. And
Right.
we're in a constant state of preoccupation with ourself. So poor in spirit is trying to get to a release of that. She said self-centered concerns.
And see, and I have a different understanding of poor in spirit totally than she does.
How do you?
Because I think what she describes as poor in spirit belongs to the beatitude, blessed are the meek, which are the humble and the ego. To me, the poor in spirit are those that are bent over with the grief of the world, that those that are struggling very hard to be enthusiastic or to be joyful. That the poor in spirit are those who feel they've lost everything. And so I just have a different take on that one. I agree with all the definitions for meek, which I think include being humble and being free from self and learning to look at others. But there are times when I would have described myself as poor in spirit. I'm struggling to find joy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm struggling to find a sense of enthusiasm, a sense of blessedness.
Yeah.
And then I'm poor in spirit.
Yep.
So that's just my take on that definition.
Ruth, and then Paul, and then Jonathan. Go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, I have kind of a different take on poor in spirit too. I've struggled with that one, but sometimes I feel that it means doubt, so that if you are in spirit, you hear and feel and understand the Holy Spirit. And if you're poor in spirit, that's not happening at that time. And so you have that sense of being lost in this outer space that faith is speaking to.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I've felt that. And so then it's hard to understand how that's blessed, but.
Because it means I'm not cast off.
Mm-hmm.
That even
Right.
in that time, God is present.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I think partly what Jesus is saying is when you find yourself in that spot, don't think you're being punished. Don't think you're being thrown aside, but no, I can bring you a gift in this.
It makes I still have to, we'll have to go back to this punishment and reward thing. But anyway, Ruth, what you just said made me think of Thomas Merton's prayer, which is my Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going.
Yes.
Have you all heard that prayer?
Yes.
I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I'm following you does not mean that I am. And then it ends, therefore I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost.
Exactly.
To me, that's what I heard. Paul, go ahead.
So I think that these Beatitudes, each one, have many facets. And so one that I sometimes use is I put a comma after poor. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And that comes from understanding, letting go of attachments, so that you are not distracted from the main job, which is to come as close as possible to God. So in this interpretation, or this facet of that, letting go of attachments allows you to become much closer to God, to see God more clearly in everything. And one of the things that Amy Jill Levine talked about was, and so many others, I'm doing Howard Thurman right now, and he also talks about this, that when I see myself as a part of creation and utterly in relation to everything, then I am far more able to understand what Jesus is talking about and what God is pointing at. I love what Howard Thurman said. He said, if I do not have that relationship, then I profane creation. That's amazing.
Jonathan, then Carol Sadler. Go ahead, Jonathan.
As with Paul, I'm amazed at the many different interpretations you can have for each of these lessons in the Sermon on the Mount. And just for variety, my understanding of the meek shall inherit the earth is that the meek are the ordinary people. And rather than you having to be a superstar in order to be a successful Christian, it is the meek, the ordinary people who are following the Lord, and they shall inherit the earth. And the other thought about that is that when we think we're so good and our way of life is going to take over everything else, it doesn't work that way. It's the common people living day by day that are going to prevail. And so that's my sense of what that means.
Carol Sadler, go ahead. Where are you?
This is a question, and Paul had spoken to liking the one that says, blessed are the pure in heart. And I've never really understood what that meant. Does that mean, you know, perfection, that you're just a saint? What does it mean to be pure in heart?
Let me ask you, did you like her explanation? Did you see the video, or were you there for the video, or no?
I'd seen it earlier. I'd watched it a couple days ago.
Because she talked about that. I was kind of curious to see what you thought of her response.
You know, perhaps didn't think about it at the time I was watching, and it was just when Paul had mentioned that being the one that spoke to him, I just thought, I don't really know what that means.
And she, in the video, she talked about, because did she talk about it? I don't think she talks about pure in heart in the book.
No.
No, she said she didn't.
Right. And in the video, she said pure in heart means, the peacemakers was the hardest one. She thought was the most difficult. Pure in heart was, what did she say about it? Anybody remember? I'm trying to think.
She
For me,
mentioned salt of the earth.
She
That
what?
was one description, to be the salt of the earth, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I think to be close to
Jonathan's common person.
I think it has more to do with not perfection, but being God-centered, God-focused. That's where that the intention that you're doing, that's what she talked about. The intention that you're doing something from is not on yourself. It's more for God, on God.
I think you're right. I think that's what she
But
said.
it's not perfect. Kathy has her hand up.
Well, no, so I have Donna, I've got Kathy, I've got Michelle. Is anybody responding to this? Is anybody trying to answer that? Okay, so Kathy, let me go ahead. I just want to make sure I've got like 4 hands going.
Okay, what I remember from the videos, the pure of heart were the people that were trying to not make bad assumptions about other people, not trying to prejudge people. and staying open and being able to respond to the person as a person. And that's a very hard thing to do. I would agree. They're pure of heart.
Yeah.
But a helpful
With
way.
curiosity. Michelle, what was your take from what she said?
Well, I wrote down in my notes, I said, recognize your own talents, but also be aware of nature and your belongingness to everything. You know?
Yeah, the connectedness to everything, to all that we're connected to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. I remember that too. Good. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, now Donna, go ahead. And then I think Mike. Mike had his, did Mike speak? Yeah, I don't work. Oh, there. Go ahead, Donna.
Donna? Oh, Michelle hit on a word that I've been thinking about, and that's recognition. And if you add recognition to the beginning and say, recognizing your blessings if you are poor in spirit. And the poor in spirit to me would be an emptiness. I got that from listening to Faith. When you feel empty and are open, God is there for you. So once you recognize that, you're blessed. And probably you could apply that recognition to every one of these Beatitudes. I haven't tried the rest of them, but it really hit me from our discussion today.
Mike, go ahead.
Well, I really am just going to echo Donna now, because it seems to me that what the Beatitudes are about is accepting that God is active in our life all the time, and these emotions and things which we think of as being negative at first look are actually a gift, so that we can get through things and we can see God's actions in our lives, in spite of the fact that we feel terribly diminished at some point in time. It's upside down is the right word.
It is.
Yeah, and I think maybe, Mike, what you just said is a reflection for me, because like I think about what, again, Jesus is Jewish, and he's talking to other Jewish people. And so these individuals would have been familiar with the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament. And I see, like, if you look at the Psalms and you look at some of the wisdom literature, I see parts of the Beatitudes in that. And to me, it's Jesus just saying, it's all here for us. It's like, we're believing, Jesus is God incarnate. Jesus is the Word made flesh. And so now the Word made flesh is here telling us, blessed be those who mourn, for they will be comforted, versus a prophet, versus, a king, versus a priest. It is now God in flesh telling us, which I know that they may not have completely recognized that, but that's what they were starting to recognize. So that's how I see it, because I don't see it as it is countercultural to the entire culture of what they were experiencing. Again, they're a minority oppressed group under Roman control. So it is countercultural to that experience, but I don't think it's countercultural to Judaism.
Mm-hmm. To parts of Judaism, yes.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
There we go. My favorite hymn is "Let There Be Peace in the World and Let It Begin with Me." And one of my favorite of these Sermon on the Mount statements we're talking about is, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be the sons of God." And in my work on understanding what the global knowledge civilization is like, it begins with global peace. You have to have peace in order to have the possibility for people to be fulfilled and happy. And that's what they're created for. So I see this as an important thing. Anybody who's helping to bring about peace is doing the Lord's work. That's what I hear that saying, and I really love it.
Okay, thank you. Do we want to go into breakout? Now, breakout rooms are really kind of taking very specific ones and out of the video, talking more about, you know, what does it mean to be poor in spirit? Well, we've already talked about this. Okay, so now maybe give examples in a small group of how does that show up in your life? So now really try to articulate what it means to you personally. How is it showing up for you? Or how doesn't it show up for you? It goes back to mourning. Lori gave a great example of how that's shown up for her in her life. So do we want to just do a breakout room for at least like 10 minutes? And I'll go ahead and post these in the chat. If you have an agenda, it's helpful to have them in front of you, copy, and.
Are you gonna just do 2 breakout rooms or how many?
I can do 2. That will make 9 people in a breakout room. If you want it, it's just a little harder. It's a little, yeah, here they are. Okay. 3 might be better.
Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, or because it's just that way everybody gets to share a little bit.
Yeah, that'll put at least 6. It's when we get below.
All right, what else? What else came out of the small group? Anything, questions, thoughts, other reflections? Paul? Nope, unmute.
Like yours.
There you go.
Ours was mostly on peacekeeping.
Is it difficult?
We were talking about our personal experiences with organizations and things like that. Sometimes recognized and appreciated, sometimes ignored, sometimes put upon.
Peacekeeping?
Yeah.
It's a tricky
Except
one.
it says peacemaking.
Or peacemaking, sorry.
No, I'm raising a question of it.
No, so it's peacemaking.
Peacemaking or peacekeeping?
It's peacemaking, but it's also peacekeeping. When you're, let's say, on a board of directors that is in conflict, a part of it is peacemaking, but a part of it is also involved with peacekeeping, especially if you happen to be the chair. It can be hard.
I think so, Paul, but sometimes I think we're so afraid
I don't think you can keep
that we want to keep peace and make peace that we don't allow for the presence of struggle or conflict.
Depends. If one is going into it with that point of view, but if you're talking about a group of people at 7 or 8 and they are in conflict and they're strong personalities, it's not.
I don't think it's easy to keep peace. I don't think it's easy to make peace either. It does make me think of reconciliation and what's the word? Restorative justice. Restorative justice is what it makes me think of. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not resolved. It's resolved. I think there's I think it's liberation. I think there's a liberating experience in it if it for both sides, but I don't think the situation is ever, you don't forget the situation, but there's a way to, like, I always think of that one foundation. Gosh, what is the name of it? It's here in San Diego. It's
whose grandson was killed delivering pizza.
The grandson was killed by the gang member.
Assis?
Oh, something like
with
that.
An A.
Yeah. It always makes me think of that and how restorative justice came together. Anything else? Go ahead, Carol Sadler.
I just, in the idea of being a peacemaker, I'm puts me in mind of the recent announcement from the Vatican
Oh.
and what the Pope must be feeling at this time, because the position that Francis has taken is in definite not making peace among some of the members of his council there at the Vatican, and how brave he is in doing this, and but not exactly being a peacemaker.
No. Yeah, that's a great, yes. Does everybody know what she's talking about? Go ahead, Mom.
Okay. What we talked about too was to be a peacemaker, you're going to be persecuted. It's not a, you have to accept that you're going to be persecuted, and you'll make sacrifices, whether it's good or bad, but you have to. It's the only way it's going to happen. It's not like, oh, you think peace, oh, it's going to be loving and joyful. Well, it's not that way.
Not all the time, or
not all the time.
Right.
Maybe it ends up like that.
Maybe for some people it does.
Yeah.
All right, so it is 11 o'clock and I want to honor any time boundaries. I do want to just share before we leave that she did have optional activities. I didn't write them, but you can invite participants to look through recent newspapers and magazines for pictures and articles they believe could illustrate one or more of Jesus's Beatitudes. That'd be a great thing to do with the kids, Lori. I just thought about that. Ask participants to present and explain their selection. So if you guys are seeing anything in newspapers or magazines that would illustrate one or more of Jesus's Beatitudes, you could share it with us next week. And then another option was to write their own beatitude, expressing what, informed by this session's reading and discussions, they believe the kingdom of heaven is. So, I thought those were two really interesting things to do this week if you have the time to write your own beatitude, maybe your one-liner, or to, as we look through the paper or online in social media, how does this illustrate Jesus's Beatitudes? Does it illustrate Jesus's Beatitudes? Maybe it's the opposite of Jesus's Beatitudes in our current situation. Anyway, so those are some takeaways that you could work on through the week. And if you wanted to share next week, you could definitely do that. Anything else? No, I mean, we'll stay on. So if you do have other questions, you can do that. But again, I do want to honor a time boundary. It's 11:03. And so please go in peace, go in love, and have a wonderful week. And just continue.
Do we know what we're going to do for Advent, or will we know next week so we have enough time to order it?
We're working on it for Advent.
Yes, chapter 2 next week.
No, she was talking about Advent.
Yeah, I know. I'm responding to Nancy's chat. Yes, chapter 2 next week.
And are we for this book, it has 6 chapters. So are we combining 2 of them in one thing?
Yeah, we think so.
Yeah.
We haven't decided which one. So for right now, just read chapter 2. It's a lot. I mean, the Sermon on the Mount is Matthew 5 through 7. And we literally just did 5 verses 1 through 11 today. So I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do, but just read chapter 2 for next week and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks, Lori. So good to see you. Yay.
Thank you all, guys.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is very meaningful.